have Dr. Nabil Shaath, a member of the Palestinian Legislative Council. Doctor, thank you very much for joining us here on RT. Some Israeli officials admit that they are losing the battle at the United Nations. Are you confident of a positive vote?
We're absolutely certain in the General Assembly. That's where the votes count. In the Security Council, of course, you need just one of the 5 permanent members to say no, which is precisely the United States, and that will be a veto that will stop the decision in the Security Council, at least for a while.
But a non-member status in the General Assembly is only symbolic. What do you need it for?
Well, there is a lot of symbols in this world that people die for, respect has so many symbols, dignity has many symbols that human beings think are important. So it's not to minimize or to marginalize symbols of dignity, freedom and independence. But it's not all about symbols, because when we become full members of all of these international organizations, that gives us more clout in facing Israel's attempt to deepen our occupation with settlements, give us more say in determining the kind of terms that are used when we go back to negotiations. I think we will have to go eventually back to negotiations.
Do you plan to act around the veto of the US in the UN Security Council?
Well, the question of sequence, we might go to the General Assembly first and equip ourselves with whatever ammunition the General Assembly can give us, but then we will keep knocking at that door until we open it.
When Barack Obama became President of the United States, there was high hopes that he would play a positive role in resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But now, his opposition to the vote, do you see this as a stab in the back? It's really abject surrender to the Israelis.
Whether he meant it to be a stab in the back or not, I mean, he surrendered to Mr. Netanyahu's rules. And he does so not because the United States is subservient to Israel. No, it's because the United States government and president, when he faces such huge domestic pressures and domestic problems, and then he comes close to a re-election time, he has very small margin of maneuver on other issues, such as the relationship with Israel. So maybe if Mr. Obama is re-elected, he might be more capable of really pushing for the program he suggested 2 and 3 years ago, that all settlements ought to stop, including in East Jerusalem, so that it will allow a more reasonable climate for negotiations.
Are you concerned there's going to be violence? For several months now, the Israeli army has been preparing for violence, but there are those who are saying that it's almost as if it's creating the violence in its preparation for it.
Yes, I think that's our hypothesis, that if there is any violence, it will be really created by the Israelis, but we'll do our best not to respond. I mean, look, all the area around us, with the exception of Libya and the NATO and all of that, but Syria, Egypt and Tunisia, you really have people who took as much violence as their governments were able to use against them, and the people are still non-violent. They succeeded in Tunisia and Egypt, and I think it's done. Non-violence is not surrender. Non-violence is not a passive reaction to occupation or to oppression, for that matter. Non-violence is people's determination to get what they want without violence.
The Israelis say, let's negotiate first, let's sort out all the outstanding issues, and then they'll recognize a Palestinian state.
You know, somebody takes your house and occupies all of it, but says that the only thing I want is the garden and the basement. But in the meanwhile, I'll occupy all your home to force you to do so. Let's negotiate. So you negotiate, and none of the things you agree he ever implements. And that's what the Israelis are doing. We've been negotiating for 20 years after Madrid, for 18 years after signing the Oslo Agreement, which required them to withdraw from every inch of Palestine with the exception of East Jerusalem and settlements in 3 years, which they didn't do. So it is really utterly ridiculous. Come to negotiations to do what?
Just how difficult would it be now to go back to peace negotiations?
No, it's not hard at all. tomorrow Israel accepts the last quartet decision which was issued in Moscow, which we approve of completely and totally, which includes stopping the settlement activities and accepting Resolution 242, we'll go tomorrow to negotiation. We'll go yesterday to negotiation.
Are negotiations still necessary?
Absolutely necessary, but negotiations need always two very important international conditions. One, you stick to the terms of reference, you don't keep changing the terms of reference, and two, what you agree, you implement. If you don't follow these two rules, negotiations are futile, it's useless.
What are the details of the new plan, and how will the two states coexist?
No, the two states will definitely coexist in peace, because when there is a full withdrawal of the Israelis from our state and we sign a peace agreement, we will definitely commit ourselves to all the steps of neighborliness, security and peace. We want to end the occupation. We want to be a free and independent neighbor in peace, not an occupied, oppressed a country that the occupier still considers our land to be disputed and not occupied.
But what if Israelis, as is anticipated, don't withdraw from the disputed territories?
We will continue to put all the non-violent pressure that we have to get them out. And I think this step will help us gain more ammunition, peaceful ammunition, non-violent ammunition, that will put pressure on them.
Where would the future Palestinian capital be? Here in Ramallah?
No. The future capital will be East Jerusalem. And until East Jerusalem is free, Ramallah is an administrative temporary capital.
Are the West Bank and Gaza capable of functioning as a single state?
Well, they will be much more capable of doing so when the Israeli occupation and siege of Gaza ends. I think that's what's deteriorating the situation in Gaza. The Israeli siege by land, by sea and by air. When that is over, yes, of course, I think Gaza and the West Bank they were one people. We have really no ethnic differences and very, very minor religious differences. If
you succeed on the independence vote, would you use your access to the International Criminal Court?
Of course, I mean, if we become even a non-state member of the United Nations, we can be full member in the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. And in these organizations, which are highly legal, you do not go and harass people by politics. You have to have solid cases to go with. I mean, if we become a member of the International Criminal Court, and I hope we will, that will be really our best defense against any further Israeli crimes. Several people asked me, like what? I said, like going into Gaza and killing 1,400 people with phosphorus bombs and napalm. We will go to the International Criminal Court. It's Israel that has to worry about using that kind of force against civilians. Israel continue to take our land and create settlements on them. We will go to the International Criminal Court about violations of the Fourth Geneva Conventions, about not changing demographics of any occupied state. So it's Israel's problem, not our problem. They have to stop committing international crimes.
Israel has reason to feel isolated, almost cornered, for various reasons. Is there a growing feeling of insecurity in the region?
If I were in Israel's shoes, I would say, yes, there is going to be growing insecurity if they continue to follow that position. I mean, their policy is what isolated them. And I want to remind you of the 4 risks that Mr. Obama told the Israelis about in his speech in Washington. One, he said, the growing Palestinian demography in Palestine and Israel, the growing numbers of Palestinians and quality, ability of these Palestinians that Israel has to take into consideration. 2, the Arab Spring and its way it's going to change the balance of power in the area. 3, changing technology, which makes their claim for so-called secure borders totally ridiculous. I mean, secure from what? From guns and pistols or from rockets coming from 500 100 or 5,000 kilometers away. And fourthly, the growing impatience of the international community as to the Israeli pace in the peace process. And all of these are real. So Israel should worry about. Look at what's happening in Turkey and Egypt. Two very important states in the area which used to have not only peace but friendship with Israel are today really at odds with Israel.
How important in the bigger struggle of the Palestinian people is this independence vote?
It's a step. It's not the end of the game. It's a step. It's a step that should give us a little bit more ability to defend our case and to go to proper negotiations that produce results. It's no more than that. Look, we have been for a century trying to have independence for our country. And it's difficult. We went into armed struggle, we went into negotiations, we went into political struggle. We are decided now not to go back to violence, and therefore this is a non-violent step in the right direction.
Dr. Nabil Shaath, thank you very much for joining us here on RT.